What's going on, guys? What we're doing, and welcome to a brand new video tutorial from iPrinimus. So after a couple of the last video tutorials that were like crash courses and stuff, I just wanted to make something really quick and really nice and smooth as a video tutorial. So what we're going to talk about today is how you can convert your React application, which pretty much uses React router underneath for managing the state and moving off between pages and creating a multi-page application. How you can take your application and pretty much add transition between pages. What I mean by transition is actually when you're trying to like move from one page, for example, you go to the home page or something, you get a really nice and a really smooth transition, like it slides or it fades in and it fades out, or there's like a zoom transition or any CSS transition you probably might imagine doing. You can of course doing it, but there's actually some kind of a tricks and techniques involved with that, so you need to actually watch the video tutorial to understand how it works, because there's a couple of things to cover. You need to put class names, and you need to do like specific and small tricks and tips behind your code in order to make it work properly. So this is the application we're going to be working on. I've got just set up a very simple, straightforward application on React and React router. There's actually just 2 pages, some dummy text in here, lorem ipsum, and of course just a simple image. If I try to click this, it just gonna takes me to the about page. It's clear to see the path up there pretty much changes, and everything working pretty much fine. You can go back, but as you can clearly see, there's no transition yet. So we're going to take this application from the ground up and try to add some transition to it, and we're going to pretty much create a slide transition. So we can go back, and you will pretty much say or see the home page sliding from the left to the right very smoothly using transition. If you could try the next page, you can see the about page sliding from the left to the right and vice versa. You can do it with many pages, and you can of course select your own CSS transition or animation as you want it to be. So we're just gonna start. This is the project in here, just like a very straightforward project with Create React app. So it's actually set up using Create React app, and of course React router to manage the state between multiple pages. As you can clearly see, I've got only 2. I've got the home page and I've got also the about page in order to be able to transition between both of these. Now what we need is actually I've got 2 pages in clearly seen here, which is the home page, which has like some dummy text and an image. And the about page of course has also some dummy text and of course linking back to the home page. So I want here to add an animation. Whenever we click, like for example the back button, the animation gonna run and it's gonna translate us and show us the home page very smoothly with this awesome transition or animation. So I'm gonna be adding a slide transition, so it's gonna be like sliding from left or sliding from right. It's gonna calculate from where it's gonna slide during the runtime, so you don't really have to hard code to tell it just only slide from left or only slide from right. Now it's gonna do both of them depending on some kind of constraints and the depth of your page. So let's go and start. We first need to go ahead and just like install React Transition Group. So this is gonna pretty much what we use. If you don't know what is React Transition Group, it's just like a library or a small framework that allows you to add CSS transitions between your components during their mounting and in mounting from the actual DOM. So as we all know, we can only do animation to like a normal HTML element or just React element or a component while it is mounted to the DOM, but this component or this library pretty much allows you to add animation, and after the animation finishes, it mounts it automatically for you from the DOM, and vice versa. It's gonna just do the animation, mount it to the DOM, and carry on with us all the kind of things. So that's why we really need it. So I'm gonna do npm install React transition group. This is pretty much all you need to do, and make sure to save it as dependency because you're gonna pretty much need it. Of course, we're gonna also be using Sass in this case, so a CSS preprocessor. If you don't know what it is, or there's actually a video tutorial on my channel, but to install it, just quickly on your React Create app, it's just only for React Create app, because for other applications and like custom webpack application, you're gonna probably need to add some more configuration other than that. So you can just go and install Node Sass, and everything gonna be pretty much working fine for you. So this is all the setup you need to do right now, and make sure to set up your pages as they probably want to be in here, because it's a really important thing to put your pages beside in here, and which pages you are gonna build this transition between both of them. So now I'm just gonna try to import the transition group. I'm gonna do transition group and CSS transition. So from React Transition group, so I'm going to be just importing it from here, and this is transition where it allows you actually to declare or give it like a CSS file, and it's going to apply the CSS file transition to whatever elements you're going to give it throughout the DOM to apply the animation to it and run the animation while this element gets mounted and mounted from the DOM using the help of the transition group components. So this is gonna pretty much what we are gonna do in here. So first things first, we need to just go ahead and keep track of the actual depth of the page. So this is actually a really important thing, like we know from where to go, from left to right or from right to left, and that we're gonna just add it using a function, of course, but just set up the most boilerplate thing. Let me just gonna get rid of this div, and I'm gonna use the transition group. So I'm gonna put the transition group as the main root for this one, and I'm gonna be specifying the components, which means I'm just gonna be rendering a div. You can the outer components or the wrapper. What is the type of the wrapper? I'm just going to be rendering a div in this case, and also I'm going to give it a class name to be using, which is the app class name, which holds some CSS styles in here to be used. And I'm going to get rid of this div really quickly. Now we've got the transition group. Now what we need is actually to go ahead and declare a CSS transition. So we need to give it CSS, and make sure to put it as I'm doing it right here, because this is a really important thing, how your page is going to be translating, and how React's router or pretty much the transition group going to take care of in-mounting your routes once they move off, like they for example move from the home page to the about page, how they can in-mount the routes or pretty much the home page and apply the animation to it, and mount the about page and pretty much apply the animation to it too. So this is a really important thing to be noticing. So I'm gonna put in here React transition. So I'm gonna say CSS transition. Make sure to close this. Gonna take this down, and yeah, there you go. Just gonna get rid of this. I'm gonna add a couple of things. I'm gonna be adding a key, and the key is gonna be something we're gonna add in a second. So let me just get rid of this for now. Also is going to need a timeout, so it's going to declare a timeout. The timeout is pretty much an object, tells it how many duration of time, milliseconds pretty much, it's going to take when entering, when mounting the component, and when in mounting the component to apply the animation. So it has actually two attributes. There's the enter, you give it the time or the number of milliseconds. I'm going to just give it 100 in here, and the exit, how much it's going to take to exit, and pretty much I'm going to just give it for 400. That's pretty great so far. So I'm gonna just give it both of these. I'm gonna put timeout in here, and it's gonna be timeout, of course. I'm gonna be putting class names, and the class names, what they specify is actually your CSS class name, because you're gonna be adding another different, completely separate CSS file that does apply this transition, and you need to specify the class name that exists inside of that. I'm gonna be naming it like page slider or something, and I'm gonna create this in a second, of course. There's actually two other properties, like mount on enter, false, so do not mount it when it enters, and make sure to do this, and mount on exit, and of course in mount it when it exits. So what we want is do not directly mount it when it enters, just apply the animation first, then mount it. This is pretty much what we mean in here, in order to get a full smooth animation. Otherwise you're gonna get like some hectic, glitchy animation, and you don't really want to see of that. This is pretty much all you probably not need to do. Now what we need is actually the best, or pretty much the most important part for translating the div either from the left or from the right. In this case here we got only the animation. It's going to be translated only from one side. We specify in here, like we say, you're only going to be translating or sliding from the right to the left always, and there's no way to change this. But what we want is actually, depending on the page we are in, is actually gonna just on runtime gonna calculate whether it's just gonna translate from left to right or vice versa. It's gonna translate from right to left. So this is pretty much how it's gonna happen. And it depends actually on checking the depth of the path in here. So if the path has actually one, like in here about, and we are moving to just a single one in here, which is an empty, this depth is 1 and this one is 0. So this is a greater than 1, the greater than the other one, which pretty much gonna allows us to move from the right to the left. So this is pretty much how it works. If we actually vice versa, we're gonna move from the home page and move on to the about page. So move on from depth 0 to the depth greater of depth, which is depth 1, and 0 minus 1 is actually just, you know, less than 0, just a negative number. We're gonna probably just means we're gonna move from left or slide from left to right. This is just, you know, the simple logic we're gonna be applying in this case. I'm gonna add in here a couple of things, but before doing that, let me just gonna add a method that allows us to calculate this depth. So the depth is gonna be pretty much let me just do like get path depth, right? So it's gonna be to get the depth from the actual path, and it's going to take the location, and this location, what it does is allows you actually to know the current location, like information about the current location. It gets supplied throughout the props from the React router using the with router hook in here. So you should go ahead and use it. It's actually the context. So just specify with the hook when you're exporting your application, which has the route and everything. It has the transition, and make sure to export it like as this one to make it works properly. And the location is going to be put inside of the prop, so you can easily use it without any problems. So this is pretty much all we need for this case. I'm going to be adding the depth right now, and as we've told you before, the depth is just going to be just for calculating either from moving from left to right or vice versa. So I'm going to create a variable. It's going to be path array, and it's going to just like I'm going to say the location. So I'm just going to remove this. So I'm going to say location.pathName, and there is actually an attribute inside of this. There is the path name, which pretty much gets you this specific path. Where is the actual current page is pointing? Is it / or / about, which is the about page? So this is what we need to know, and we actually need to split this depending on the / So we're just going to get rid of the / and this is what we mean in here. And I'm going to also say now path array. I'm going to filter it, so I'm going to do path array dot filter, and filter, what it does, it just going to returns and filters depending on a single Boolean expression, and returns a complete array depending on the Boolean expression you specify. So this is pretty much what it does, and it takes of course a function. I'm going to be making sure that n, which is every single item exists inside of the path array, which is just like a normal string, doesn't equal to an empty string. So if it does equal to an empty string, we're gonna completely remove it from the array and return all the other elements that doesn't actually aren't empty or doesn't equal to an empty string. All of them gonna be put inside of the path array. This is pretty much all we're doing for this case. And lastly, we're gonna just be returning the path array, and since this array, we can get the length of it. So we're going to return the length of it, and during the runtime, we're going to compare a length, or pretty much the length, and we're going to store hypothetical length inside of the state in order to know which page it is actually. So we're going to be doing this inside of there. I'm going to do previous depth, which represents the previous page's depth. So I'm going to do this get depth, and I'm going to be putting it inside this .props.location. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Also, we don't really need to forget that every single time we receive the props from the application itself, we're going to receive a new location, so we need to update the props and update the state or the actual state with the updated props. I'm going to do a component will receive props, and the will receive props is just like I'm going to register new props inside of the super method or this dot props. I'm gonna be doing this dot set state. I'm gonna updating the state pretty much, and for updating the space, I'm gonna doing previous depth this dot get path depth, and I'm gonna also be passing it this dot props dot location. So pretty simple, nothing really complicated. I'm gonna be using the method of just created to get the actual depth, the length of the depth pretty much, and return it and save it inside of the state. And later on, now inside of this div, so we're gonna be creating a new div. And this div is gonna pretty much just gonna take, okay, it can't create a div for some reason. It's gonna take a class name, and this class name is gonna be checking if it is actually greater than 0 or less than 0, which means a negative number or a positive length number of the path name of the page. So I'm gonna do this dot get path depth. I'm gonna be passing the location. We're extracting from the props, remember, and I'm gonna do, since this is gonna return a length, so we're gonna compare it to this dot state dot previous depth. So I'm going to check if the current depth we are currently in equals the previous depth, which represents the depth of the previous pages. So I'm going to compare it with 0. So I'm going to be just adding in here if it is greater than 0. If that, I'm going to use a ternary inline if statement in here. If you don't really know what it is, I'm going to put left, else I'm going to be putting right. So it's actually just a class name you're going to specify inside of the CSS file. So every single CSS file you do for the transition of your application and pretty much between pages, you need to include the right or left if you intending to add the slight transition between pages. So that's pretty much what we're doing in this case, just checking if it is greater than 0, then we just put left, otherwise we just put right, and so on and so forth. So this is for the actual div we've got up here. I'm going to be closing the depth or the div, and of course we're going to be closing it right down here. Also for the React router, make sure to wrap it using a switch, because if you don't, that's going to be really hectic and you're going to have some problems throughout the animation. I'm not saying it's not going to work or something, it might work, but sometimes it does not, so make sure just to wrap it. Now what we're going to probably do is add actually a current key, which represents the current location key for getting everything re-rendered from scratch on the CSS transition. So if this current key gets changed, the CSS transition gonna get re-rendered and we're gonna apply the animation. So we need this really needed. So I'm gonna be putting the path name in here. I'm gonna calculating it the same thing. I'm gonna use the split method, and the split method I'm gonna get rid of the /, and since it returns an array, the split method, so we're gonna get in the first element, which pretty much gonna represent the path name without the slash. Like we removed the slash and we got a bot in this case, we can just get an empty string or something. That's pretty much what it means. And if anything happens in here of the location isn't defined or pretty much something like this, I'm gonna put an or, and it's gonna work as a fallback. So if this is undefined, you can just go ahead and use this by default without any problems. And that's pretty much it. Now we can just go and put a key in here, and the key props for the React is actually a key prop that allows React to get re-rendering some specific part of a web page, which is in this case this is elements of the CSS transition. So if this key has changed, the CSS transition is going to be re-rendered, and React is going to take care of that. So that's why I'm going to put the current key in here related to the location path name. So the path name, once it changes, the CSS transition is going to get re-rendered, and of course it's going to apply the whole animation. So this is the whole point of it. It's going to apply the whole animation. It's going to put the new div. It's going to calculate the get depth and the states of the previous div. It's going to calculate all different things in here, and it's going to put the right thing and apply, of course, our transition. So this is a really important thing in here. If you don't do it, it might not work. So yeah, make sure to put it in here. Now the time actually to add our slide transition as a CSS file. I'm gonna go inside of the project, inside of src, and I'm gonna be putting page transitions, and instead of that I'm gonna be also putting new file. I'm gonna make it slide transition dot CSS for SAS. You can obviously, of course, use CSS without any problems, but it's way much better to add SAS. So for the React transition group, it actually has a 4 state to be working on. So it's actually on enter, on like entering, or pretty much enter is on, and of course there's actually enter active, which means when it enters, then it's currently active inside of the enter. There's actually exit, and exit is active, or exit is done. So actually a couple of states to be taken care of. I'm gonna be using in this case. So I'm gonna be adding like page slider, the same class I've added back then. Once it exits, I'm gonna add first the exit location of it, and it has actually some kind of a page elements in here, which is going to be representing every single page. In this case, its own current element takes a class name with the name of page. So you need to put that in here. If you don't, the animation is not going to be working. Of course you can get rid of that, but it's way much better to be putting it in here, so you can mark the pages, your components that you want to apply the transition to, and the other components that you don't want to apply the transition to, just by removing the page class name from the class name list on the actual root elements of the components. So that's pretty much what it does mean. I'm going to be adding a z index, and the Z index just for transition. So every single transition, like fading transition or zooming transition, flipping, 3D transition, anything like that has its own parameters in here. So yeah, this is only for sliding from right to left. That's why I'm adding it. Now we're gonna add the enter, and of course for page, once it enters, I'm gonna take the Z index up 10. So I'm gonna add make it 10 in here, just elevate it, because one page is gonna come underneath the other, and that's how it's gonna pretty much working. I'm gonna be adding also a page slider, and it's gonna enter, but in this case it's gonna be on the left side, and make sure always to use the page in this case to apply to the actual page elements. Apply all of the CSS properties that we're gonna list in here. I'm gonna use the transform, so I'm gonna be transforming it, and I'm gonna be translate 3D, and I'm gonna be translating it 100% on the X, 0 on the Y, and 0 on the Z. So only gonna be translated on the X because it's just gonna be horizontally sliding a single page and another from the web page. So pretty much what's gonna happen. I'm gonna be copying this because I don't really need to retype everything. So I'm gonna put this slider. In this case, it's gonna be the right. So once it enters, what is gonna happen from the right? Of course, I'm gonna be putting -100 because it just like goes from left to right. So this is how the transform property works on CSS. So vice versa, to come from right to left, you need to just put a negative number, and there we go. Also, with the other case, we've got the exit. So once the exit is actually happening, but from the left side, what we need is actually to make it back, like we reverse. Once we go from left to right, now we need to come back from right to left. That's why we put a negative number, and the same thing happens for the right, but in this case it is on the exit. So once it exits, we're gonna grab the current page, which is exiting of course, and we're gonna just move it from left to right, and just like put a negative number. It's just like pretty much the vice versa of the once you enter, once you exit on the right, just by putting a negative number in here, and pretty much everything gonna be pretty much working. So of course this is not gonna be, so you need to mix the absolute contradiction of this. And lastly, we need to add is actually a page slider. Once it is active, we need to apply some kind of animation to it, and I'm gonna be adding transfer. So I'm just gonna put this in here again. So once add enter, and so page slider dash enter, and it is currently active. So once it is active, but we don't care if it is left or right, I'm just gonna be adding this. So translate 3D 0. So in this case, we already applied the animation, everything is working pretty much fine. Now we need to disable the animation and show the actual page to the user. So stop the animation and everything, and I'm gonna add a transition property in here to apply the whole transition. I'm gonna add all all elements of the web page to make sure the whole web page gets transitioned and transformed from one position to another. I'm gonna add 800 milliseconds just to make it take quite some time to be noticed, and of course I'm gonna add easing out, so to apply animation on both ways, like on the exit, on the entering of course. And that's pretty much how it's gonna work. So this is the whole transition you might want to add. Actually, it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward, nothing really complicated. You can of course add your custom transition, but this is how the slide need to be done, at least in my case. And we can just go ahead and use now the class name, which is the page slider, and it should pretty much work. So let's just go back inside of the app.js, and inside of the app.js, make sure to go ahead and import the CSS file that we've got. So I'm gonna do import, we go back, page transitions. I'm gonna grab the slide transition.css to actually read and execute the CSS files, CSS properties in there. And of course, make sure to put the class name in here. If you have like multiple transitions to be put in here, like a fade transition, you can also put it, because you're not gonna have only a single class name. You might have many class names, and depending on that, you can apply whatever you would like. And that's pretty much how it works in these cases. So just save that, make sure to save everything, and go back to your application. So we can just go back. You can do another refresh to make sure that everything is pretty much refreshed and up and running. For some reason in here, yeah, the mistake like filter, it's not like that. It's not how you spell filter. Where is the problem exactly? So should right now work pretty much fine. Saving it again, going back, should refresh. There we go. Now if we try to click translate to my next page, as you can clearly see, we get this really smooth moving from left to right transition. We can do go back. As you can clearly see, the page comes from like left to right, and here in this case it goes to from right to left and so on and so forth. So as you can clearly see, the calculation in here are doing pretty great. Once we are inside of the like about page, it needs to go back to the home page, so it applies, or pretty much it goes from left to right. This is how you visualize backward on your head, or if it goes forward from the home page to the about page, it's gonna move on from right to left, as clearly seen here, and the about page kind of comes off in here. You can add multiple pages, and of course you can add more complicated algorithm for fetching out from where to move, like the transaction duration, or the actual transform from where to move from the actual left to right, or vice versa. But that's how it pretty much works. I really like it. Just a quick thing. I know I might talked a lot, but I just try to explain everything and hopefully make everything clearly for you. You can get the source code on GitHub. The link down in the description below. You can get it, you can play with it, and hopefully you can figure out something and add your own custom awesome transitions between pages, because a page with this awesome and cool transitions, it makes it look like, you know, next level, very high, and super professional. You can add this to your portfolio, and you're gonna make it on the toppest portfolios and high levels and stuff. So thank you guys for watching. I really do, guys. Have enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe, push the like button if you really like it. If you really wanna, you know, give us your feedback and let us know that you're liking the video tutorials, to make them better and improve them. Of course, make sure to go ahead and check out iPnews.com for really awesome tutorials, and GitHub. Our GitHub pages has a lot of awesome open source applications and projects, so make sure to go ahead and check them. And thank you guys for watching again. Like, I can say thank you a million times, but you know, it never gonna be enough for you guys, because you're super good and super awesome. So thank you guys for watching again. Hope you guys enjoyed. See you all hopefully in the next one.